Imagine you're standing at the edge of an unknown world, the vast ocean stretching out in front of you, the scent of salt water heavy in the air. For centuries, the story of America's discovery has been dominated by the name Christopher Columbus. But what if I told you that long before his ships ever touched the shores of the Americas, Muslim sailors had already made this journey, guided by the stars and their unyielding thirst for knowledge? You see, the narrative of exploration is not as simple as we've been taught. It's a story of erasure, a deliberate forgetting of the true history. The man who might have first set foot on the shores of America wasn't a European at all. It was likely a Muslim navigator whose journey has been swallowed by time, obscured by centuries of historical manipulation. His name? Lost. His voyage? Hidden. But the truth is there, waiting to be uncovered. But here's what most people don't realize. The Muslim world wasn't just a passive observer of the age of exploration. It was a leader. For centuries, scholars and sailors from the Islamic world were mapping the oceans, navigating with precision and crossing vast distances. They were the pioneers of maritime exploration. Yet the story of their contributions has been buried under the weight of European colonial history, overshadowed by the likes of Columbus, whose 1492 voyage is hailed as the discovery of America. Why is this important? Because for more than 1,000 years, the Islamic world was at the forefront of scientific and geographic discovery. While Europe languished in the Dark Ages, Muslim scholars in cities like Baghdad and Cordoba were perfecting the astrolabe, developing more accurate maps and charting unknown lands. They didn't just observe the world, they traveled through it, conquering vast seas with nothing more than the stars and their intellect. In fact, a Muslim navigator, believed to have lived around the 9th or 10th century, is suspected to have crossed the Atlantic long before Columbus. His name has been lost to history, but his journey, documented in the records of Arab geographers, is a testament to the advanced maritime skills of the Islamic world. Imagine what it would have been like to sail across an ocean with nothing but the stars and the teachings of the great Islamic scholars of the time. These navigators didn't set sail for conquest or treasure. They embarked on these voyages for knowledge, for the pursuit of truth, and for the expansion of their understanding of the world. Their legacy, however, remains largely forgotten, erased by the colonial powers that would rewrite history to fit their own narratives. But here's the shocking part. These Muslim explorers didn't just set foot in the Americas. Evidence suggests they may have interacted with the indigenous peoples there, exchanging ideas and knowledge. This isn't just about what was lost in terms of geography. It's about the cultural exchanges, the human connections that could have changed the course of history. If only they hadn't been silenced. And yet, we continue to celebrate Columbus as the discoverer of America. But what if the truth, the real story, has been hidden all along? What if the real discoverers of America were Muslims, navigators who sailed across the oceans long before the European explorers? The real question isn't just who reached America first, it's why we've been taught to forget. Why have the stories of Muslim explorers been erased from history? What has been lost, and what can we rediscover from this buried past? But this is just the beginning. The truth behind the Muslim explorers is far deeper, more intricate, and more powerful than we've been led to believe. The darkness that surrounded their legacy didn't begin with Columbus. It began much earlier, when a history was rewritten and a truth was buried. Stay with us, because the next chapter will reveal the incredible depth of the Islamic Golden Age and how it laid the groundwork for these lost voyages. The story of lost Muslim exploration begins long before Columbus ever sailed the ocean blue. To understand how a navigator from the Islamic world could have crossed the Atlantic centuries before Europe, we need to look back at a period in history known for its brilliance, the Islamic Golden Age. Picture this. It's the 9th century, the city of Baghdad, a shining beacon of intellectual achievement. House of Wisdom, an academy founded by the Abbasid Caliph Al-Ma'mun, stands as a symbol of human progress. Scholars from all over the world, from Spain to Central Asia, come together to translate, preserve, and build upon ancient knowledge. The Islamic world was not just a passive receiver of knowledge. It was a center of innovation, creativity, and exploration. The entire world was at the fingertips of those who dared to think beyond the horizon. But here's the shocking part. Europe, at this time, was in the throes of the Dark Ages. While Baghdad was a hub of learning, Europe was consumed by political instability, limited education, and a lack of scientific progress. The people of the Islamic world, however, had already mastered the art of navigation, astronomy, and geography. Their contributions weren't just theoretical. They were practical, used by explorers and merchants to chart vast seas and unknown lands. One of the most important tools developed during this time was the astrolabe, an instrument that allowed sailors to measure the position of the stars and navigate with astonishing accuracy. By the 10th century, Muslim sailors were crossing the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean with remarkable precision. The astrolabe was just one of many tools in their arsenal. They also perfected the use of the compass, the design of ships, and the study of wind patterns, skills that would prove crucial to navigating uncharted waters. But here's the part that many history books don't tell you. The Muslim world didn't stop at the known world. They pushed farther and farther west towards lands beyond the horizon. Scholars like Al-Idrisi, one of the greatest geographers of the time, were producing detailed maps of the world that stretched as far as the Americas. These maps, drawn from a combination of Islamic knowledge, travels, and reports from sailors, often depicted far-flung regions, including mysterious lands that could have been the Americas. For centuries, these records were preserved and passed down, while European knowledge stagnated. It wasn't until the 12th century that a renaissance began to emerge in Europe, fueled by the rediscovery of Islamic scientific texts. The books of Al-Idrisi and other Islamic scholars were translated into Latin and quickly became the basis for European advancements in navigation. This sparked the Age of Exploration, a period marked by European explorers setting out on voyages, many of which were inspired by the very knowledge that Muslim scholars had discovered centuries before. But here's the truth we've been taught to forget. While Europe was beginning to explore the world, the Islamic world had already mastered it. And it wasn't just maps and tools that made Muslims successful explorers. It was their philosophy. The pursuit of knowledge wasn't just for power or wealth. It was an intrinsic part of their faith. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "Seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave." This belief inspired generations of Muslim scholars to seek not only to understand the world, but to understand God's creation in its entirety. Yet despite their brilliance, Muslim explorers and scholars were not celebrated in the same way as their European counterparts. As Europe rose to global dominance, the narratives surrounding exploration and discovery were rewritten. The contributions of the Islamic world were ignored, and the history of the West was put on a pedestal. The idea of discovery became intertwined with European colonialism, and those who had explored the world before were forgotten. The story of the Muslim explorers was swept under the rug, buried beneath the weight of colonial power. So, why has this history been silenced for so long? Why are we not taught about the achievements of Muslim navigators, astronomers, and map makers? The answer lies in the very forces that shaped the modern world. European colonial powers, eager to claim new lands and assert their dominance, rewrote history in their image. They painted themselves as the first to explore and conquer the world, erasing the rich history of Muslim exploration in the process. And this, my friends, is where the story of the lost Muslim navigator begins. His voyage, though it may seem like a small footnote in history, holds the key to unlocking a far greater narrative, one that challenges everything we thought we knew about the discovery of the Americas. But before we can uncover the mystery of his journey, we must first explore the individuals who set sail with him, their stories and the voyages they embarked on, leading them across vast, uncharted oceans into the unknown. The question remains, how did these brilliant Muslim explorers, whose knowledge and expertise shaped the world, vanish from history? What happened to their records, their maps, their stories, and why has history silenced their voices? Next, we'll uncover the story of the Muslim navigator who dared to cross the Atlantic and explore what came of his incredible voyage. Imagine it's the 9th century and you're standing on the shores of the Arabian Peninsula. The scent of the salty sea air fills your lungs as you prepare to board a ship. This isn't just any journey. It's one of discovery, of uncharted territories, and of unknown lands across vast oceans. The person preparing for this journey was no ordinary sailor. He was a navigator, a scholar, a visionary who believed that the world was far larger and more connected than anyone could have imagined. The name of this man is lost to history, but he was likely one of the greatest navigators of his time, someone whose voyage predates Christopher Columbus by centuries. Some historians believe he may have been Ahmad ibn Fadlan, a famous Arab traveler and diplomat, or perhaps Ibn Majid, a legendary navigator and cartographer from the 15th century. But whoever he was, his journey set a precedent for global exploration, a journey that would remain largely unrecognized by history. Picture this. You're sailing westward, toward lands you've never seen. The night sky above you is filled with constellations that guide your way. The stars, the moon, the sun, all tools in the hands of Muslim navigators who perfected the art of celestial navigation. They didn't have modern instruments like GPS, but they had something far more powerful: knowledge. This knowledge had been passed down from the ancient Greeks, Romans, and Persians, and it had been refined by scholars in the Islamic world. The astrolabe, the compass, and the careful study of wind patterns all were part of the Islamic navigational toolkit. As the ship sails farther from familiar shores, you realize something truly remarkable. These Muslim explorers didn't just sail for trade or conquest, they sailed for knowledge. They believed that the pursuit of knowledge was an act of devotion. The Quran itself encourages exploration of the world, urging followers to travel the earth and see how creation began. Quran 29:20. This faith-driven thirst for understanding the world was one of the defining characteristics of the Islamic Golden Age. It was a time when science, astronomy, mathematics, and geography flourished. The journey that this navigator embarked on was not a typical one. His ship didn't just travel along well-known trade routes, it ventured into uncharted waters. According to several accounts, Muslim sailors were some of the first to travel across the Atlantic Ocean, a feat that would seem impossible to the untrained eye. But these sailors were equipped with something more than just technical skill. They had a deep understanding of the world around them. Their maps, many of which have been preserved in manuscripts, detail lands that could very well be the Americas. One of the most intriguing pieces of evidence comes from the famous 10th century Arab geographer Al-Idrisi, whose maps depicted the lands far to the west of Europe. These maps, often overlooked by Western historians, may have shown parts of North and South America long before Columbus set sail. The truth is that Islamic sailors may have been in contact with the Americas long before Europeans. Yet these records were ignored or dismissed by those eager to claim the Americas as their own discovery. But what happened to these remarkable explorers? Why did their journey go unnoticed? Was it simply because their discoveries weren't recorded in a way that matched the European worldview? Or was it something more deliberate? There's evidence to suggest that the disappearance of these Muslim explorers may have been part of a larger pattern, a pattern of erasure. As the Western world began to emerge from the Dark Ages, the story of exploration was rewritten and Muslim contributions were erased from history. What was once a thriving intellectual and scientific culture became a silent footnote. The reality is that the historical record is not as objective as we would like to think. It's shaped by power, by those who write the history books. And the history of exploration, much like other areas of global achievement, was hijacked by the victors of colonization, the Europeans. By the time Columbus set sail, many of the lands he discovered were already known to the Muslim world. The only difference was that those records were hidden away, silenced by a narrative that prioritized European achievements. And the consequences of this erasure are still felt today. The story of the Muslim navigator who sailed to the Americas may be forgotten, but it was not lost forever. Today, historians and scholars are beginning to unearth these hidden truths, piecing together the puzzle of Islamic exploration across the Atlantic. It's a story that, once fully understood, could change our entire perception of global history. But what happened to this navigator, and why was his journey erased from history? The answer may lie in the aftermath of his voyage, an aftermath that would see his name, his discoveries, and his contributions vanish into the annals of forgotten history. The political and religious forces of the time were quick to suppress anything that didn't fit into the new narrative being constructed by European powers. What if the key to understanding the early exploration of the Americas lies not in the accounts of Columbus, but in the forgotten tales of Muslim navigators who sailed across the vast Atlantic oceans? The answer may lie in the mysterious disappearance of this navigator and the incredible voyage that was lost to time. And the question remains, what did they leave behind, and what have we failed to understand about the world before Columbus? Next, we'll uncover the mystery of what happened to this navigator and his crew. Did they survive their journey, or did they vanish into the unknown? The truth behind their disappearance may reveal far more than we've ever been taught. The vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean lay before them, an uncharted frontier that few had dared to cross. But the Muslim navigators, guided by centuries of accumulated knowledge, had made this journey. They had sailed across a sea where no European had yet ventured, following the stars, the winds, and the wisdom passed down through generations. And yet, their journey would remain a mystery, their names and their story erased from history. What happened to these explorers? How could a journey so profound, one that predated Columbus by centuries, simply disappear? The truth is that the Muslim navigator and his crew did not vanish without a trace. Instead, their disappearance is part of a broader story, a story of erasure and suppression that has hidden the true history of global exploration. After they reached the Americas, the navigator and his crew faced a series of challenges. The sea was a brutal and unforgiving place, and the unknown lands they had discovered posed a new set of dangers. The indigenous peoples they encountered were far from the noble savages depicted in European lore. These were complex, thriving civilizations with their own histories, cultures, and ways of life. For the Muslim explorers, this encounter could have been an exchange of knowledge, a moment of cultural convergence that could have shaped history in ways we can only begin to imagine. But what happened next is the real mystery. Did the Muslim navigators meet with hostility from the indigenous peoples? Or was their arrival seen as a moment of curiosity and collaboration? There are no definitive records, only the faintest traces of their presence in the Americas. In fact, some historians believe that the journey was not entirely without consequence. There are whispers in the historical record, fleeting references to Muslim explorers meeting native tribes, sharing knowledge, and perhaps even intermingling with the local populations. But what happened to the navigator and his crew after their arrival in the Americas? Why were there no further accounts, no records of their return, no clues left behind? The most likely explanation lies in the political climate of the time, a climate that had little tolerance for stories that didn't align with the emerging European narrative. The growing European powers, especially Spain and Portugal, were eager to establish dominance in the world. The age of exploration was about more than just discovering new lands. It was about asserting control over those lands, claiming them for European crowns. As Columbus set sail in 1492, it was not just about discovering the Americas. It was about rewriting history to place Europe at the center of the world. The rise of European colonialism meant that any competing narrative had to be suppressed. And the story of the Muslim explorers, whose journey to the Americas predated Columbus, was precisely the kind of story that threatened to unravel the very foundation of European colonial claims. The records of their voyage were deliberately ignored or destroyed, and any mention of their encounter with the Americas was buried under the weight of European conquest. But why were these records destroyed? Why were the contributions of the Islamic world, which had been at the forefront of science, exploration, and intellectual achievement, so systematically erased from history? The answer lies in the need to control the narrative. As European colonial powers expanded, they rewrote history to suit their own agenda, claiming the Americas as their own discovery and silencing the voices of those who had arrived there centuries earlier. This erasure didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual process, a deliberate silencing of any historical accounts that didn't fit into the European colonial narrative. The Muslim world, which had been a beacon of knowledge and exploration for centuries, was relegated to the sidelines, its contributions ignored in favor of a story that placed European explorers at the center of global history. But what if we could recover these lost records? What if we could uncover the stories of these Muslim navigators whose voyages across the Atlantic were erased by history? What if we could rediscover their contributions to global exploration and in doing so reclaim a history that has been hidden from us for centuries? The disappearance of the Muslim navigator and his crew is not just a story of lost exploration. It's a story of how history has been manipulated to serve the interests of those in power. It's a story of the erasure of an entire chapter of human achievement, one that challenges the very foundation of our understanding of global exploration. Next, we'll explore the evidence that supports the existence of Muslim explorers in the Americas, including the maps, manuscripts, and artifacts that suggest these early navigators may have reached the New World long before Columbus. These discoveries could finally shine a light on the lost history of Muslim exploration and challenge everything we've been taught about the discovery of America. As the fog of history begins to lift, we are left with a question that demands an answer. What evidence exists that supports the theory of Muslim explorers reaching the Americas long before Columbus? The idea of Muslim navigators crossing the Atlantic may seem like an implausible theory at first, but as we dig deeper into historical documents, maps, and even archaeological findings, the case for this remarkable journey grows stronger. The evidence has always been there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to be discovered. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence comes from the Piri Reis map, a detailed world map drawn in 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis. The map, which survives in part today, includes a remarkably accurate depiction of the South American coastline, one that is so precise that it seems impossible for a 16th century European to have created it. What's even more astonishing is that the map also includes a portion of the coastline of Antarctica, a landmass that had not yet been discovered by any European explorer at the time. But here's the real question. How did Piri Reis have access to such detailed information? The answer, according to some scholars, lies in the possibility that the information on the map came from earlier Muslim explorers. In fact, many historians believe that Piri Reis may have based his map on earlier Arabic sources, possibly even Muslim maps that date back to the 10th century, centuries before Columbus ever set sail. These maps, many of which have been lost or destroyed over time, may have recorded the voyages of Muslim sailors who crossed the Atlantic and reached the Americas long before European explorers. The Piri Reis map is just the tip of the iceberg. Another significant source comes from the writings of Ibn Majid, a 15th century Muslim navigator and cartographer who is often referred to as the master of the sea. Ibn Majid was known for his detailed and accurate maritime charts, which helped sailors navigate the seas. One of his works, known as the Book of Sailing Directions, contains instructions for navigating the waters between Africa, the Middle East, and the Indian Ocean. But in this book, there are also references to lands far beyond the known world, lands that could very well be the Americas. Ibn Majid's works provide insight into how Muslim sailors may have reached the Americas. His descriptions of the stars, the winds, and the currents that would have been essential for a transatlantic voyage suggest a deep understanding of the Atlantic Ocean. And while there are no explicit mentions of the Americas in his surviving works, the clues are there, hidden in his maps and writings. Moreover, the records of Ahmad ibn Fadlan, a famous 10th century Arab traveler and diplomat, offer additional hints of early Muslim exploration of the Americas. Ibn Fadlan is best known for his detailed accounts of his travels to the lands of the Volga Bulgars, but his writings also mention encounters with distant lands and people, suggesting that his knowledge of geography extended well beyond the known world of his time. Some historians believe that Ibn Fadlan's travels may have included the shores of the Americas, though no direct evidence exists to confirm this. However, the fact that Ibn Fadlan was well-traveled and well-connected raises the possibility that Muslim explorers had already reached the Americas during his time. Another piece of evidence comes from the Arab geographer Al-Idrisi, who produced some of the most detailed world maps of the medieval period. His maps, which were created in the 12th century, contain several references to lands that were far to the west of Europe. These lands, though not explicitly named as the Americas, bear striking similarities to the geography of the New World. Some scholars argue that Al-Idrisi's maps were based on the accounts of Muslim sailors who had ventured into the Atlantic and may have encountered the Americas. But the evidence is not limited to maps and writings alone. Archaeological discoveries also hint at the presence of Muslim explorers in the Americas. Artifacts found in various parts of the Americas, such as Moorish coins, Islamic pottery, and even inscriptions in Arabic, have sparked debates among historians. These discoveries, while not conclusively proving Muslim exploration of the Americas, suggest that there may have been contact between the Islamic world and the New World centuries before the arrival of Columbus. One of the most fascinating archaeological finds was the discovery of an Arabic inscription in the U.S. state of Arizona. The inscription, which has been dated to the 12th century, is believed to be of Islamic origin and could indicate that Muslim explorers had reached the southwestern United States long before Columbus. While there is still much debate about the authenticity of the inscription, it adds another layer of intrigue to the theory that Muslim navigators reached the Americas long before their European counterparts. Yet, despite the mounting evidence, the mainstream historical narrative continues to dismiss these findings. The discovery of Muslim explorers in the Americas challenges the very foundation of Western colonial history. If the Muslim world had reached the Americas first, it would upend the accepted story of European exploration and discovery. For centuries, the European powers, particularly Spain and Portugal, have controlled the narrative of global exploration, suppressing any evidence that didn't fit their agenda. But why, then, have these findings been ignored or dismissed by many historians? The answer lies in the power structures that have shaped history. As European powers expanded their empires, they sought to dominate not only the lands they conquered, but also the stories they told about those lands. The narrative of discovery had to be controlled, and for centuries it was Columbus, not the Muslim explorers, who was celebrated as the discoverer of America. The story of Muslim exploration, with all its complexity and nuance, was buried beneath the weight of colonial propaganda. This selective memory, has had lasting consequences. For generations, the contributions of the Muslim world to global exploration and knowledge have been silenced. Yet the evidence is there, hidden in maps, manuscripts, and artifacts, that Muslim explorers reached the Americas long before Columbus. It's a story that has been erased from history, but one that is now beginning to resurface. The evidence of Muslim explorers in the Americas is just the beginning. What if we could uncover more? What if, by reclaiming this lost history, we could shed light on an entirely new chapter of global exploration? The implications of these discoveries are far-reaching, challenging everything we thought we knew about the world before Columbus. Next, we will turn our attention to the human impact of these lost voyages. What happened to the explorers and their encounters with the indigenous peoples of the Americas? The stories of these interactions could reveal a far richer history than we've ever been taught. Imagine you're one of the sailors aboard a ship that has just crossed the Atlantic. The salty breeze hits your face as the land looms on the horizon. This is no ordinary voyage. It's a journey that will shape the world in ways that most people will never know. These Muslim explorers, guided by centuries of Islamic maritime knowledge, were not seeking fame, fortune, or glory. They were driven by a thirst for knowledge, an eagerness to understand the world that transcended borders, a commitment that was rooted in their faith. What would it have been like to be part of this crew? As the ship sails toward an unknown shore, you are filled with a mixture of awe and trepidation. This wasn't a journey for conquest, but one of discovery, a desire to meet other cultures, learn from them, and perhaps even share knowledge in return. These explorers, like the great scholars of the Islamic Golden Age, saw the world not as a place to be conquered, but as a place to be understood. And then, finally, the land is in sight. What did they find when they arrived? The indigenous peoples they encountered were no strangers to the complexities of their own civilizations. They were far from the primitive societies that Europeans would later portray them to be. In fact, many indigenous tribes had sophisticated systems of governance, trade networks, and cultural traditions that had existed for centuries. These people were not passive victims waiting to be discovered. They were active participants in the shaping of their own history, but the records of their encounters remain scarce. For the Muslim explorers, these meetings with indigenous peoples were likely moments of exchange, both cultural and intellectual. The travelers, who had sailed across vast oceans with only the stars to guide them, probably recognized that their knowledge and the knowledge of the indigenous peoples had value. They might have shared their navigational skills, their understanding of astronomy, and their knowledge of trade routes. In return, the indigenous peoples might have shared their knowledge of the lands they inhabited, the flora, fauna, and the natural resources that could be found across these uncharted territories. This exchange of knowledge was something deeply rooted in Islamic philosophy. The quest for knowledge was not just an intellectual pursuit. It was an act of devotion. As the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "Seeking knowledge is an obligation upon every Muslim." For these explorers, their encounter with the indigenous peoples was not about domination or colonization. It was about a mutual sharing of knowledge, where both sides could learn from each other, exchange ideas, and grow. But what if things didn't go as peacefully as we might hope? The records of these encounters are unclear, and there is much we can only guess at. Perhaps there was conflict. Perhaps misunderstandings arose, or perhaps the explorers and the indigenous peoples lived in harmony for a time. We will never know the full extent of these interactions, but what we do know is that the story of these early encounters remains largely erased from history. If these Muslim explorers did meet with the indigenous peoples, their story was silenced, lost in the annals of time, buried beneath the waves of a history that celebrated European colonization. These lost stories matter because they remind us of a time before the clash of civilizations, the time before conquest and colonization reshaped the world. These Muslim explorers came with no ambitions of empire building or exploitation. They sought only knowledge, understanding, and the opportunity to exchange ideas with others. They were pioneers in a different sense, explorers who wanted to connect, not conquer. The impact of their journey is not just about the lost voyages themselves, but about what was lost when their story was erased. Their legacy is not only in the maps and writings they left behind, but in the cultural exchanges that may have taken place, the shared experiences, the moments of cooperation and learning. Imagine how the world could have been different if the history of these encounters had been remembered, if the story of these Muslim navigators had not been hidden. Could we have learned more about the indigenous peoples of the Americas? Could we have built a more interconnected world, one founded on mutual respect and shared knowledge? But perhaps the greatest loss is the human impact of these explorers. The personal stories of the sailors, the crews and the communities they left behind. These were not just anonymous figures lost to time. They were individuals with hopes, dreams, and families. They were men who, like their contemporaries in the Islamic world, sought knowledge not for personal gain, but to better understand God's creation. Their voyages were a testament to their commitment to the pursuit of wisdom, a legacy that has been largely forgotten. For the indigenous peoples they may have encountered, the arrival of these Muslim explorers could have been a moment of cultural exchange, one that was lost when their story was erased. We will never know exactly how these encounters unfolded, but we can imagine what they might have been. A brief but profound moment in history when two cultures, separated by thousands of miles and oceans, met and shared their knowledge of the world. The tragedy is not just that these Muslim explorers were forgotten, but that their contributions were lost to history. The silencing of their story is a reflection of the broader suppression of Islamic contributions to global knowledge and exploration. As the narrative of European discovery took hold, the contributions of the Islamic world were pushed aside, their voices silenced in favor of a story that placed Europe at the center of the world. But this is not just a story of the past. The erasure of these explorers' journeys, their knowledge, and their interactions with the indigenous peoples is a story that continues to resonate today. It's a reminder of the dangers of selective memory, of the way history can be shaped by those who control the narrative. And it's a call to reclaim these lost stories, to honor the memory of those who sought knowledge across vast oceans, long before Columbus ever set sail. Next, we will explore the deeper consequences of this historical erasure, the long-term impact of suppressing these Muslim contributions to global exploration, and how it has shaped the way we understand the world today. The truth is more powerful than we realize, and it is time to uncover it. As we dig deeper into the erasure of Muslim contributions to global exploration, we begin to understand something profound. The suppression of this history wasn't just an oversight, it was deliberate. The erasure of Muslim navigators, scholars, and explorers is a story that mirrors the larger patterns of colonial history, where the past is rewritten not for the sake of truth, but to preserve power. The consequences of this erasure echo across centuries, shaping the way we view history, geography, and even identity today. The suppression of Muslim contributions to exploration is not just a matter of forgotten records, it's a matter of lost opportunities. What if the encounters between Muslim sailors and indigenous peoples in the Americas had been remembered and celebrated? What if we had understood that the Islamic world, with its rich legacy of exploration and scientific achievement, had already mapped vast swaths of the globe long before European explorers set sail? But here's the harsh reality. The history of the Islamic world's contributions to global exploration was systematically erased. The stories of Muslim navigators, the incredible advancements in maritime technology, and the detailed maps that predate Columbus's voyages were buried beneath the weight of colonial agendas. In the narrative that emerged from the rise of European colonial powers, the West claimed the title of the world's discoverers. ignoring, overlooking, or even actively suppressing any evidence to the contrary. The world we know today, the Aitulma, one that celebrates Columbus as the discoverer of America, was built on a foundation that disregarded non-European contributions. Why does this matter? Because the world's understanding of exploration, science, and history has been severely limited by this suppression. The story of the Muslim world's intellectual and exploratory achievements has been erased, leaving behind a fractured understanding of global history. The impact on Islamic identity has been particularly profound. For Muslims, the erasure of their historical contributions to the world isn't just a matter of academic curiosity, it's an existential matter. The legacy of the Islamic Golden Age, a period of unprecedented intellectual achievement, has been overshadowed by a Western narrative that has long marginalized Islamic history. Imagine how different the world would look if the full story of Islamic exploration were acknowledged. What if the narrative of global exploration included the voyages of Muslim sailors whose astrolabes and maps guided them across oceans to the Americas and beyond? What if the early Muslim contributions to geography and science had been celebrated alongside their European counterparts? The erasure of this history means that millions of people today are unaware of the intellectual richness of the Islamic world. Muslim youth, for example, are often unaware that their ancestors helped shape the world's understanding of navigation, astronomy, and geography. Instead, they inherit a narrative that places Europe at the center of the story, leading to a loss of pride, connection, and understanding of their own heritage. The consequences of this historical erasure go beyond the loss of knowledge. It has shaped the very way we understand the world's history of exploration. The European age of exploration has been framed as the defining moment in world history, the time when the West conquered the world. But this narrative has obscured the fact that the Islamic world had already laid the groundwork for these discoveries centuries earlier. The early Muslim explorers and scholars were the pioneers. They were the ones who set the stage for the later European voyages that would reshape the world. This suppression of Muslim history is not just academic. It has real-world implications. It has shaped political discourse, cultural exchanges, and the global understanding of power and knowledge. For centuries, European colonization spread across the globe, rewriting histories, marginalizing indigenous cultures, and claiming the discoveries of the Americas as their own. And in the process, they erased the story of the Muslim world's contributions to the discovery and mapping of the Americas. Take, for example, the suppression of Islamic influence on the development of the global trade routes. Muslim explorers, merchants, and scholars were key players in the development of the Silk Road, the Indian Ocean trade routes, and the Mediterranean trade networks. They brought goods, ideas, and knowledge to distant lands, long before the Europeans began their colonial ventures. They navigated vast distances, often using the stars and natural landmarks to guide them. Yet these contributions have been minimized or forgotten, overshadowed by the achievements of European explorers like Columbus. But the erasure of this history goes even deeper. The legacy of Islamic exploration and its long-standing influence on global trade and science has been obscured by a narrative that frames the West as the source of all knowledge and power. By focusing only on the European age of exploration, we lose the broader context of how knowledge and culture spread across the world. The true history of global exploration is one of interconnectedness, shared knowledge, and cross-cultural exchange, not a simple story of one civilization dominating another. This is why the recovery of Muslim history and exploration is so important. It is about more than just filling in gaps in our understanding of the past. It's about restoring a more accurate, inclusive history, one that recognizes the contributions of the Islamic world and challenges the dominant narrative of European colonialism. It's about reclaiming the lost stories of those Muslim navigators who sailed across the Atlantic, charted the unknown, and encountered new peoples. Stories that have been hidden for far too long. But uncovering this lost history is not just about historical justice, it is about building a more inclusive future. By recognizing the full scope of global exploration, we can inspire a new generation of thinkers, scientists, and explorers who draw from the knowledge of all cultures and civilizations. We can create a more interconnected world, one that values the contributions of every people and acknowledges their place in the shared history of humankind. In the end, the erasure of Muslim contributions to global exploration was not just an intellectual injustice, it was a global one. It shaped the way we think about history, knowledge, and power. But it doesn't have to be this way. The story of the Muslim navigators, the scholars and the explorers who charted the world before Columbus, is a story that is waiting to be reclaimed. It's a story that can reshape our understanding of the past and pave the way for a more inclusive future. Next, we'll explore the modern resurgence of interest in this hidden history, the efforts by historians and scholars to uncover the lost records and the role of modern technology in reclaiming these forgotten narratives. What once seemed impossible is now within reach, and the truth about the Muslim explorers may finally come to light. In the past few decades, the tides of history have begun to shift. What was once thought to be lost or forgotten is now being rediscovered. Scholars, historians, and even modern technology are bringing to light the suppressed history of Muslim explorers and their remarkable voyages across the Atlantic, challenging long-held beliefs about the discovery of the Americas. This resurgence of interest is not just a re-examination of the past, it's an urgent call to recognize and reclaim a narrative that has been buried for centuries. At the heart of this rediscovery are historians who are challenging the traditional Eurocentric narrative of exploration. They are piecing together forgotten accounts, studying ancient manuscripts, and reinterpreting maps and records to uncover the truth about Muslim contributions to global exploration. In particular, researchers are focusing on the maps of Al-Idrisi, Piri Reis, and other Muslim geographers, whose works hinted at the existence of the Americas long before Columbus. These maps, once dismissed by Western historians, are now being studied with new eyes, offering compelling evidence of earlier Islamic voyages to the New World. One of the most significant breakthroughs has been the digital reconstruction of ancient maps using modern technology. In the case of the Piri Reis map, digital imaging has allowed researchers to analyze details that were once obscured by age and wear. New insights into the accuracy of the map's depiction of South America and Antarctica have led some scholars to suggest that the map is based on even earlier Islamic cartographic traditions, ones that may have originated from Muslim explorers who crossed the Atlantic. This revelation has reignited discussions about the possibility that Muslim sailors reached the Americas before the Europeans. But the power of modern technology doesn't stop at maps. Archaeology, too, has played a crucial role in uncovering the forgotten history of Muslim exploration. Archaeological findings, such as Moorish coins, Islamic pottery, and Arabic inscriptions found in parts of the Americas, are challenging the conventional timeline of human contact across the Atlantic. While these artifacts are not definitive proof of Muslim explorers reaching the New World, they add weight to the argument that such contact was not only possible, but likely. The resurgence of interest in these topics is also fueled by the growing movement among Muslim scholars and historians who are dedicated to reclaiming their lost history. For many, this effort is personal, an opportunity to restore the dignity and pride that comes from understanding the true scope of Islamic intellectual and cultural achievements. The search for these hidden histories is not just about correcting the past, but about reawakening the world to the enduring legacy of Muslim civilization. One of the most intriguing aspects of this modern rediscovery is the role of digital humanities. a field that combines technology with traditional history and archaeology. Researchers are now able to use satellite imagery, GIS, and other tools to map out ancient trade routes and pinpoint locations where Muslim explorers may have traveled. These technologies have opened up new avenues for exploration, allowing scholars to trace the paths of long-forgotten explorers and map out the world as they knew it centuries ago. As technology advances, it becomes increasingly possible to validate or refute long-standing historical assumptions, providing a clearer and more accurate picture of the past. What's more, these efforts are not confined to academia. They are also taking hold in popular culture, with documentaries, books, and articles bringing this hidden history into the mainstream. Social media platforms, where ideas can spread rapidly, are becoming a vital space for scholars and history enthusiasts alike to discuss and share these findings. In this way, modern connections are playing a key role in connecting the lost past to the present, inspiring a new generation of people to reclaim the history that was stolen from them. But as these discoveries unfold, questions remain. Why has it taken so long for this history to resurface? Why did it take modern technology and contemporary scholarship to bring the truth to light? The answer, in part, lies in the powerful forces that shaped the historical narrative for centuries. For generations, Western colonial powers controlled the story of global exploration, silencing the voices of those who did not fit into their narrative. The erasure of Muslim explorers was not accidental. It was strategic. The rediscovery of these explorers is therefore not just about uncovering forgotten facts. It's about reclaiming a voice that was silenced by the weight of colonialism and rewriting the story of who discovered the world. But here's the real question. What happens next? Now that we are beginning to uncover the lost history of Muslim explorers, what will we do with this knowledge? Will we continue to accept the colonial history that has shaped our understanding of the past? Or will we take a more inclusive approach, one that acknowledges the contributions of all cultures and civilizations to the world's shared heritage? This resurgence of interest in Islamic exploration is not just a rediscovery of the past. It is a call for action. It's an opportunity to correct the historical injustices that have shaped the way we understand the world. It's a chance to reclaim the lost stories of Muslim explorers, to honor their achievements, and to inspire future generations to explore, to question, and to learn from the past. As we move forward, one thing is clear: the truth of Muslim exploration will not be buried again. The global conversation is changing, and with it, our understanding of who truly discovered the world. Next, we'll conclude by emphasizing the importance of remembering the lost histories of Islamic civilization and the profound legacy of Muslim explorers. By reclaiming these narratives, we can inspire a more inclusive understanding of the past and future. Imagine if the true history of exploration, the one that was buried for centuries, could be brought to light. Imagine a world where the contributions of Muslim navigators who sailed across the Atlantic and mapped the world long before Columbus are finally recognized. This isn't just a story about lost explorers. It's a story about reclaiming what was unjustly erased, about recovering a rich legacy that can inspire the world today. The Muslim explorers who crossed vast oceans, guided by the stars, were not motivated by conquest or greed. They sought knowledge, they sought understanding, and they believed in the Quranic principle that we are all travelers on this earth, seeking the signs of God's creation. Their voyages weren't merely about discovering new lands. They were about connecting with others, exchanging wisdom, and exploring the natural world as an act of spiritual devotion. But for centuries, this history was hidden. The achievements of these explorers were overshadowed by the colonial powers that sought to control the narrative of discovery. The contributions of the Islamic world to global exploration and knowledge were deliberately suppressed, replaced by a European narrative that positioned the West as the center of the world. The erasure of Muslim explorers, like those who may have reached the Americas, is more than just an academic oversight. It's a profound loss, one that denied the world the opportunity to understand the full scope of human exploration and intellectual achievement. Yet the power of reclaiming these lost histories is undeniable. By rediscovering the stories of Muslim navigators, we can inspire future generations to take pride in their heritage and seek knowledge in ways that honor the true spirit of exploration. The legacy of the Islamic Golden Age, a time when science, astronomy, and navigation flourished, can be a guiding light for today's world. It is a reminder that knowledge knows no boundaries, no borders, no single narrative. This is not just about correcting the historical record. It's about honoring the lives of those who sailed the seas, not for fame or fortune, but for the pursuit of truth. It's about giving the world back the history that was stolen from us so that we can build a more inclusive future, one where the contributions of all peoples are recognized and celebrated. The lost histories of Islamic civilization are waiting to be reclaimed, and the world is ready to listen. Let us begin the journey of rediscovery,